Okay, so we've got our wood fillers all dried. We've sanded everything. So you do get the variety of colors when you're using the skid wood. And I've tried to, say, rotate the boards so that when this is in place, like all these nail holes that are along this, you won't see any of them, because when it's standing up, it's going to be a bottom edge. Your mattress is going to be up along this part of the headboard somewhere, so you're never going to see that anyhow. And the same as the ones up here. The nail holes, we filled them all up here, but once this is standing up, if you're standing next to it, you're taller than the headboard is, so that's going to be on the underside. You're not going to see that. So it's all sanded, ready for some stain. We've got some sample pieces of wood. I tried to get, some different color variations to mimic the colors of wood that we have in that headboard. And I've been playing around with some stains, and I think this is the where we're going to go with. We are going to do the 2 coats. The first one being this red chestnut. And when I was playing around trying samples of what I wanted to do, I put this on, and while it was still wet, I went over with the red. And I also did another sample where I put this on, I let it completely dry overnight. Then I come back and put the red over it. It turns out that's what we wanted to get. So I'm just putting the first coat on now of the red chestnut. It's not real bright in here, so hopefully it shows up okay. I've just done half of it, so you can kind of see the difference anyhow between not done and done. So there's different techniques that some people use when they're staining. Some people will put it on with a paintbrush and it's very wet, and they'll leave it and they'll let that soak in. There's different applications. There's no right or wrong, it's all your own personal preference. Play around with it and you'll see the different color effects and shades you can get by leaving more stain on for longer periods of time or less. I use these blue shop towels, tear one in half and fold it up, and I just use it to wipe it on. I don't like leaving it on really, really wet, like puddling sort of thing. I tend to keep on wiping it until the excess is gone. When I get up along the edge, try and keep going with the grain of the wood. I know you can't see that from there because this is covering it up. But as much as you can, go with the grain of the wood. If you start going across the grain, you can end up with a different tint because it may wipe off more off of your rag in that direction, and you'll end up with a line across the end of your wood. Now right in the groove between this piece of wood and these ones, I can't get my rag, being as it's rolled up and it's curved, I can't get it right in there with my fingers. So I just use the end of a screwdriver just to get right in that crack. Stain will really go a long ways. And that's just a very small can. It was only half full, and you can't even tell I've hardly used anything out of it for doing half of this. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've done some. I've tried to get a brighter light to shine on this, and I've repositioned the camera and stuff to be up over above it, so hopefully you can see the difference. So I've basically done that half. You can see a transition in the color here across it. So this is the stain that's a little bit more red. If you were to use this all by itself on a piece of wood, you'd see that it is quite red. So we did that light brown that had a slight red color to it, and this is more red that we're putting over top of it now that it's dried. I don't know if that shows up the difference that it's making. And I'm not putting it on real heavy. You can if you like. I said this part of it is all up to you and the color that you want to achieve out of it. Maybe you can see it. So there, when you first put it on, you can see just how red it is, but I keep spreading it out so that I don't end up with a real thick red color. And you can see the shadowing in it where it's heavy and not so heavy. That's why I have another rag, so I can just kind of even that out so it's all one tone. It's not changing it very much. I'm sure it's very hard to see the difference between that and that, but it is adding a red hue to it, which is what we want. You can see when it first goes on how red this is. This rag's getting really wet. It doesn't bite much off anymore. That's why I'm using another one. That's all we want to do. Keep it all blended in. If you don't blend that in, those lines from where you start and stop, they'll dry like that and they will stay a different color. So it needs to be blended in. I'm not worried about lint off of these shop towels at all. This isn't sticky like a varathane coating or anything like that. So once this dries, I mean, if there was any dust or something like that or lint, all it's going to be is a stained piece of dust or lint, and it's just going to wipe off. So we will continue doing this. We'll let this sit and dry overnight again. And I'm not going this way against the grain. I'm trying to stay going with the grain of the wood when I get up to these edges. And we'll just take the excess off. So we'll let this dry overnight, and then we'll go over it with a tack cloth, and that'll collect any lint or anything like that before we start doing the clear varathane over it. Because we do want to have a nice clean surface when we start to put that varathane on. Now you can see how red this is there. I think maybe someday we'll do a video on just staining. We'll get some different colors of wood out, some different stains out, and we'll do some experimenting with colors over top of other colors and things like that. I don't like mixing them together in a can because then you've got a new color and it's one color you're stuck with again. So I would rather have, you know, 3 or 4 cans of some different colors, different shades of brown, and go over top of them and see what you can come up with instead of just mixing them together in the can. I think we have that all blended in. I don't see any heavy spots of the red stain sitting anywheres. No obvious transitions where there's a line in it where I've stopped and started again or anything like that. So that's going to be our final color. Once we put a clear varathane, and we have decided to go with a high gloss varathane over top of this. So once we put the varathane over top of this, that shine will make that pop up a little bit more yet. You may have missed doing the edge of this 2x4. It's looking a little more brown than everything else. I think I missed doing it. Good. So that's it for our staining. And this wood in here was quite a difference in light colored wood, dark colored wood. I thought there would have been a lot more pronounced differences between the colors of the woods after going over it with the stain, but it's blended in even better than I had expected it to. You can still see the differences, but it's not huge differences. It's not just like, wow, that's, you know, really in contrast to each other. They do blend together nicely. So I'm very happy with how that's turned out. So we'll keep you posted when we start getting the varathane on, so we'll let it sit and dry overnight and then we'll start that. So this is our tack cloth that we're going to use just to make sure we've got all the dust cleaned off of this before we start putting our varathane on. Oh, I want to say, sorry about the shaking in the last segment there where I was doing the stain. I reviewed the video afterwards and saw how much it was shaking, and I forgot I had put the stand on this end of the headboard, and you could see me working on this end, but as these sawhorses are getting older and shakier, I didn't realize how much it was shaking around, so sorry about that. But now moving on, it's sat, the stain is all dried up. I carried this in the house yesterday to mark out where I'm going to have to drill some holes in the legs for mounting this on the bed frame. And it was a little bit redder than we wanted once we got it in there and saw what it looked like. So I have gone over it again yesterday with another coat of the brown. The first stain we used, it was brown but had a slight red tinge to it. So I went back over top of the whole thing with that again. So now it has 3 coats of stain. So it was that reddish brown that we used first, which they called red chestnut, and then we went over it with the one called red Sedona, which was quite a bit more pronounced red, and then back over it with another coat of the red chestnut again. So hopefully we've got the color we want now, because I am moving on to doing the varathane now. And there won't be any change in the color once we start this. Just keep this, there's still lots of use left in that tack cloth yet, so I'm just going to put it back in a Ziploc bag. Put it away again. So for our varathane, we're using a water-based product, diamond wood finish, high gloss. It goes on looking like a milky white. I don't know if you can see it there in the can or not, and it dries clear. It goes on very thin, so it will take a couple of coats, probably 3. This brush they're not expensive brushes that I use, they're cheap brushes actually, but I keep an X-Acto knife or a box cutter knife handy. If any hairs pull out, you try and watch for them. If you see them, you can lift them off with the tip of the knife. When you're working with the Varathane, don't shake the can of Varathane, stir it gently with a stir stick, because if you shake it, it'll create air bubbles in it, which will end up in your piece. As they dry, you'll have air bubbles in your finish. I realize the edge I'm doing right now is probably out of view of that camera. Trying to keep the camera positioned overhead so you can see, because my lighting is not really good out here. I do have an extra light plugged in right now, but I got to be careful where I put the light in the camera so I don't have it shining right into the lens. You don't want to work over top of it too much, but just trying to get all the big lines and stuff pulled out. We'll see how this first coat dries, how it feels, because it is a water-based product, and as you know, water on wood will start to lift the grain of the wood. So we'll see how it feels when the first coat dries. If it feels really rough, then we'll give it a very, very light sanding just to knock off the high spots of the grain that rises up. If it doesn't feel that bad, then we'll go ahead and we'll just do a second coat. So we got a little bit more of this material on there because it's very thin, so you will sand through it very easily if you're not careful. So I won't sand after the first coat unless I have to, unless it's very rough. So it says 2 to 3 hours to recoat. If any coat dries more than 24 hours, they recommend sanding before putting another coat on. Minimum of 3 coats is recommended. Allow the finish to dry 24 hours before light use and 3 days before subjecting surface to normal usage. So I'll probably let this sit when I'm finished. It'll probably sit for a week before I actually put it in place to let it cure up some more. Even though it's drying up after 24 hours, you can touch it, you can grip it really hard, you won't leave fingerprints in it, it'll be a hard enough finish. But as it's curing for the next few days after that, it still gives off some fumes. And because this is a headboard on the bed, I don't want to be laying there, and even if it's a light amount of fumes, I don't want to be laying there and breathing in those fumes all night long. So when I'm finished with this, I'll take it downstairs, maybe to the basement, let it sit there for about a week, cure up really good, get rid of all of the fumes off of it, and then we'll actually install it and put it in place. So we ended up doing a total of 4 coats of Varathane on this. I put the first coat on, you saw that on the video, And then afterwards, I let it sit 24 hours, came back the next night, and there was actually a spot over in here that I had missed completely. But I did a second coat right over top of that without any sanding, because the first one, because it's a water-based product, the vast majority of the product actually soaked into the wood to seal it. So there wasn't any reason to sand. It didn't really raise the grain, it just soaked right in. So I did the second coat over top, let that dry. The following night I did do a very light sanding on it. I think the sandpaper I had was 320 grit paper, and I just did it by hand, no power machines or anything, because it would just strip it off too fast. So just lightly sanded it, went back over it with a tack cloth to get rid of the dust again, put a third coat on. Third coat leveled out nice and smooth, so there was no need to sand. Put a fourth coat on last night, and I put it on really heavy. It was so heavy that if you had stood this up, it would have just ran down it. But because it's laying flat, I was able to put it on nice and heavy. So I'm very happy with how the finish has turned out on this. Even though it is quite smooth, I don't know if anybody's ever done this or not, but you can wax these. I usually just use some cheap car wax. I got some turtle wax here. Now, back in the day, this was, I guess, one of the most common automotive car waxes. With some of the new products on the market now, I don't find this as much of a car wax anymore. It doesn't do a very good job at all. But it works good on furniture. And even though that is quite smooth already, a little bit of car wax on it will make a great deal of difference. I've got the holes drilled to mount this now on the bed, so when we're done this, we can get this thing in the house and get it mounted, and hopefully the color of it turns out okay, because there's no changing it now. If you're going to do something like this on your wood pieces, you want to use a wax, not a polish. A polish has an extremely fine grit to it. You can't really feel it in between your fingers or anything, but it's there. And it actually removes, if you're polishing metal with it, and you've got some, what do you call, oxidization and stuff like that on the metal, it scrubs that away. But you don't want anything abrasive in any way doing this on your finish, or you're going to end up with a cloudy finish when you're done. So make sure it's a wax and not a polish if you're going to do this. Just like you're doing the car, put it on lightly, let it dry, and then buff it off. Couldn't be happier. Turned out very nice. So, I'm going to get someone to help me carry this thing in the house, and we'll get it mounted in place, see what it looks like. Well, there we have it. We've now got it installed on the steel frame. I think it turned out very, very well. I'm happy with it. Turned out good. We put this thing, it's heavy. We put it on the scales in the bathroom, and it's just under 100 pounds. So when you're working with all this hardwood from the skids, things tend to get heavy. But it should stand up for years to come. So that concludes another video. Thank you very much for watching.